Hey everyone, and welcome back. This is actually the 10th video in our series on human consciousness in the context of Indian knowledge systems and modern sciences. And today's explainer is titled Factors of Human Consciousness. We're going to be unpacking exactly how ancient Indian philosophical treatises explain the honestly incredibly diverse ways that we experience awareness. I mean, you look around and it's pretty obvious, right? Everyone's level of consciousness is just different. Some people seem totally dialed into their inner lives and their surroundings, while others, well, they seem kind of disconnected, maybe a bit fragmented. So why is that? What's driving those individual differences? Well, today we're going to explore the causative factors laid out in major texts like the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, and several other schools of thought to really get into the mechanics of human awareness. Okay, let's dive right into this roadmap. We've got 5 main stops today. First, the foundations of consciousness. Second, devotion, duty, and action. Third, matter, mind, and discipline. Fourth, logic, reality, and unity. And finally, number 5, the tapestry of awareness. We're going from the massive macro level of cosmic order all the way down to inner psychological discipline.
So, starting with Section 1, the foundations of consciousness.
To really get a grip on individual differences in awareness, we've got to start at the absolute bedrock of Indian thought, which is the Vedas. Now, the Rig Veda introduces this overarching foundational concept called Rita. Think of Rita as the cosmic order governing the entire universe. It's literally the fundamental rhythm of existence, from the movement of stars all the way down to the changing of the seasons. But you might be wondering, how does this massive, macro-level concept actually relate to human consciousness? Well, the texts tell us that the development of our personal consciousness hinges entirely on aligning our individual actions with Dharma, which is our moral duty. When you align your life with Dharma, you're essentially stepping in sync with Rita. And when you do that, your consciousness elevates. It expands. On the flip side, if you deviate from that moral duty, the text warns that you end up in a state of ignorance and deeply fragmented awareness. Basically, your consciousness splinters when you fall out of step with that cosmic rhythm.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the Upanishads take that cosmic foundation and bring it entirely inward. They introduce 2 massive concepts: Brahman, which is the ultimate universal reality, and Atman, the individual soul. If we look at the Chandogya Upanishad, the varying levels of consciousness we see from person to person basically come down to their level of self-realization regarding this connection. How connected is their Atman to Brahman? The text argues that our consciousness is actually restricted by ignorance of our true self. It's like a limitation we place on ourselves by forgetting who we actually are. But when a person finally realizes that profound, inextricable connection between their individual soul and the ultimate reality, that veil of ignorance just drops, and that results in a massively profound expansion of consciousness. So it's really this internal realization that drives those individual differences.
Let's pause for a second, because those are some heavy, macro-level concepts. If ultimate reality and cosmic order dictate our awareness, the question we naturally have to ask ourselves is, how do we actually apply this cosmic order to everyday society? How does a super abstract philosophy translate to, waking up, going to work, and interacting with our community?
Which brings us to Section 2, devotion, duty, and action.
So, let's bring it down to street level with the Smritis, specifically texts like the Manusmriti. These texts put a huge emphasis on social conduct, ethics, and our real tangible responsibilities to each other. The Manusmriti breaks down our individual obligations based on 2 main factors: our social class, or varna, and our specific stage in life, known as ashrama. Whether you're a student, a householder, or you're retired, society acts as the stabilizing framework. The core idea is that by fulfilling the specific obligations of whatever stage of life we're in, we actually enhance our own awareness. According to the text, folks who embrace their assigned duties experience a much more harmonious state of consciousness compared to those who just ignore them. Doing your duty literally balances and focuses your mind.
But hey, it's not strictly about societal duty. It's also very much about where we direct our hearts. The Puranas, these incredibly rich collections of ancient narratives, show us the immense power of devotion, or bhakti. Take the Bhagavata Purana, for example. It shows that devotion isn't just some passive belief system. Intense bhakti toward deities is actually an active, profound driver of consciousness. Devotees who deeply emotionally throw themselves into their faith experience huge transformative shifts in their awareness and how they comprehend reality. Their spiritual practice fundamentally rewires their internal state of mind.
So, the crucial point is that our physical actions and rituals matter immensely. And this is exactly what the Mimamsa school of philosophy champions. Mimamsa highlights that actively engaging in rituals and virtuous actions directly leads to a purer state of consciousness. It essentially argues that the ethical implications of what we do in the physical world, the karmic consequences of those actions, are what separate one person's awareness from another's. By doing virtuous deeds, you're systematically wiping clean the lens through which you experience reality.
All right, we've seen how external duties, ethics, and devotion shape the mind. But how do we internalize all of that? How do we map out the actual mechanics of the mind to take control of our consciousness from the inside out? Keep that in the back of your mind as we pivot to something a bit more introspective.
Welcome to Section 3, Matter, Mind, and Discipline.
Zooming right into the internal mechanics of the mind, Samkhya philosophy introduces this absolutely fascinating duality. On one side, we have Purusha, representing pure consciousness. On the other, Prakriti, which is matter, or the material world. Samkhya tells us that the differences in human consciousness we observe out in the world stem directly from how these two interact. The big takeaway here? The degree to which you mistakenly identify with Prakriti, meaning your physical body, passing emotions, or material desires, that dictates the limits of your awareness. True liberation and a massively heightened consciousness comes from recognizing the exact boundary between the two. It's realizing that at your absolute core, you are pure observing consciousness, not just the physical stuff you're walking around in.
And this brilliantly illustrates why Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are so critical, because they give us the exact, practical steps to achieve that realization. Elevating consciousness isn't a given. It takes rigorous practice and intense discipline. You got to earn it. You commit to the practice, moving systematically through the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga, starting with basic ethical precepts and moving all the way into deep concentration. Through that process, you learn to transcend those endless, chaotic fluctuations of the mind. And only by dedicating yourself to that relentless practice can you finally hit samadhi, that state of profound meditative absorption. In the context of yoga, your consciousness level is directly tied to your dedication to calming your own mind.
All right, let's look at Section 4, Logic, Reality, and Unity.
Let's pull back to the intellectual sphere for a minute and look at Nyaya philosophy. Nyaya takes a highly analytical, logical approach. They argue that valid knowledge, which they call prama, is absolutely indispensable for understanding reality and upgrading your consciousness. So they're looking at awareness through a strictly epistemic lens. Basically, our awareness depends on how well we gather knowledge through perception, inference, and reliable testimony. If your foundation of knowledge is flawed, your consciousness stays severely limited. Individual differences in awareness, then, actually boil down to the strength of your epistemic foundation.
In a very similar vein, we have Vaisheshika philosophy. This school focuses heavily on the nature of reality and categorization. And they posit a really fascinating idea. The actual way you categorize, break down, and logically comprehend your physical surroundings fundamentally alters your state of consciousness. It's all about how your brain organizes the raw data of reality into a cohesive picture of the universe.
Let's move forward and see how this builds into the grand frameworks of Vedanta, which gives us a way to comprehend consciousness at the absolute highest level. We have 2 major perspectives to consider here. Advaita Vedanta pushes a non-dual reality, meaning ultimate reality is entirely one. Realizing that singular unity brings ultimate liberation and an infinite expansion of consciousness. Dvaita Vedanta, on the other hand, underscores a dual distinction between the individual soul and the supreme. It argues that understanding the specific, reverent relationship between the two is what elevates your consciousness. But no matter which path you look at, both demand a profoundly deep philosophical understanding to really elevate the mind.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the Tapestry of Awareness.
When we start synthesizing all these incredibly diverse ideas, the most important thing to remember is that these aren't competing theories fighting it out for dominance. They're actually interconnected lenses that build a completely holistic view of the human mind. The Vedas and Upanishads provide the cosmic order and the ultimate need for self-realization. The Puranas and Mimamsa ground us in the practical power of devotion and virtuous societal action. Sankhya and Yoga step in to give us the internal psychological discipline to entangle pure consciousness from physical matter. And finally, Nyaya and Vedanta offer the logical framework and the ultimate understanding of reality itself. Put it all together, and it is a beautifully complete system for understanding human awareness.
So, looking at everything we've covered in this explainer, we can clearly summarize the key drivers. The causative factors behind individual differences in human consciousness are just incredibly intricate.
They're driven by this amazing blend of adherence to Dharma, a really deep internal self-realization, intense devotion or bhakti, strict ethical conduct, and rigorous philosophical understanding. Basically, it takes the whole person, your mind, your body, your heart, and your intellect, to fully elevate your consciousness.
As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with one final, super provocative thought straight from the Upanishads. Consciousness is restricted by ignorance of one's true self. I really encourage you to deeply ponder that one today. Where in your own life might a lack of self-awareness, or maybe identifying a little too much with the fleeting material world, be limiting your own potential consciousness? It's a profound, literal game-changer of a question, and it's one these ancient texts have been asking for millennia.
If you found this explainer valuable and you enjoyed exploring the depths of human consciousness with me today, please do us a huge favor. Like this explainer, leave a comment below with your absolute biggest takeaway from these ancient philosophies. Share it with a friend who loves geeking out over the mind, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of our incredible series. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and keep seeking that deeper awareness.